I told him, I said, hey, you dumbass, this different word I used, this is not me.
So Mr. Cruz is a feisty one. This is kind of interesting. Mr. Cruz was served a notice for an outstanding debt, but he is not the Mr. Cruz for the debt. And he is very upset that he was served for someone else who happens to be his son. But he's not happy.
How about Pine Rest Christian Mental Health Service versus Richard Cruz?
Ready, Your Honor.
Ready?
And I've got Richard Cruz.
Richard J. Cruz.
Oh, that I remember. This is one. I've got Richard.
That's one where the process server screwed up.
I remember. Counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Mr. Goodman.
Sure. Robert Goodman appearing on behalf of the plaintiff. Your Honor, also here is process server John Jordan. It's my understanding that Your Honor scheduled this hearing today because of a letter received by the court from somebody purporting to be Richard J. Cruz, presumably the gentleman that's appearing here via Zoom. In that letter, he writes that he has a similar name to the defendant Richard G. Cruz. He doesn't mention that he is the father of Richard G. Cruz, but more importantly, he doesn't mention to the court the attempted service approximately 2.5 weeks prior to the date that the proof of service indicates, March 25th, 2023, that service was effectuated. At that time, Mr. Jordan, who's here and can certainly testify to this fact, went to the address at 7397 Nicholas Road in Flushing. At that time, the gentleman who apparently wrote this letter indicated when he asked for Richard Cruz, he said he's up north hunting and won't be back for 3 weeks. So Mr. Jordan left and returned back to the address approximately 2.5 weeks later, or exactly on March 25th, 2023. At that time, Mr. Cruz admitted that he was in fact Mr. Cruz, but then said he didn't owe any debt. The papers were left with him. And then this Mr. Cruz apparently looked up the process server's personal residence and went to the process server's home and attempted to return the papers. So as we sit here today, Judge, we effectuated service on a Richard Cruz. Our defendant is Richard G. Cruz with a date of birth of 3/21/1967. I think Your Honor is up to speed as to kind of what transpired here. If this process server did not in fact see correct Richard Cruz, it's because this gentleman standing here made it very difficult in order to do so. And I guess at this point, you know, Richard G. Cruz can certainly file a motion to set aside if he feels that service was improper.
Okay.
Okay, other side of the story. John,
Well, just briefly, because I've got process server here too, apparently. So, what in your Richard J. Cruz?
that is me, yes.
Okay.
The story is quite a bit like he says. John Jordan appeared at my place. I told him I wasn't the person being to be served. I had no debt. He asked where the Richard G. Cruz was. I think he was up snowmobiling, not hunting. Doesn't make any difference. I told him he didn't live here. I told him my name was Richard J. Cruz, as in Joseph. He looked down at the warrant that he had, and his comment was, "Oh, it's probably a typo." That's what John Jordan said. I told him it wasn't me. He left. He came back 3 weeks later. We went through this again. I told him I wasn't the person. He threw the summons in my foyer on the ground and left. Prior to that, he had given me his address. He told me he lived around the corner. on Stanley Road, about 3/4 of a mile from me. So I took the summons back over to him. I showed him my driver's license. He looked at it and he read very slowly. He said, Joseph. I'm 79 years old. I'm not in my 50s. It was obvious that I was not that person. He knew it. And I get back to my vehicle and he came out and he tried to stuff the summons back in my window. I told it to him. I said, hey, you dumbass, this different word I used. This is not me. This is, you got somebody else. He says, well, I'll tell you what. He said, I'm going to give you a phone number and you can straighten it out, which is a bunch of BS because it's not me. It's not my job to straighten it out.
So, okay, so Mr. Cruz, hold on, rather than give me much more, Mr. Goodman, do you have your processor? I guess let's start with your process server.
Mr. Jordan, would you unmute yourself, please?
Jordan?
He's attempting to unmute himself right now. Maybe
Okay.
you can help him with that, Judge.
Yeah,
I got it.
there we go. There we go. Mr. Jordan?
Yes, good morning, Your Honor.
Morning. Why don't you raise your right hand there for me? Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
So help me God.
Okay. Mr. Goodman, why don't you let you kind of coordinate with it? Go ahead and ask him questions regarding service.
Mr. Jordan, can you tell us your full name and your occupation?
Yes, John David Jordan. I am the owner of Jordan Transport here in Flushing, Michigan, and I do process serving for Great Lakes Civil Services as a part-time, just to fill in when I don't have runs.
Okay, and did you receive a summons and complaint to effectuate service of process sometime in early March 2023?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and how many times did you go? Can you tell us about the first time you went out to the Nicholas Road address in Flushing?
Yes, I went to Mr. Cruz's residence at 7397 Nichols Road here in Flushing. This was around the 1st or 2nd of March, and I knocked on the door and Mr. Cruz answered, and I asked for, yes, I'm looking for Richard Cruz. And he said, well, he's up in the UP snowmobiling. And I said, okay. I said, do you know when he's going to be back? And he said, well, he could be back at the end of the month. And I said, all right. I handed him a card that had Great Lakes Civil Services. Is just a informal business card. I did have my name wrote on it, my telephone number. And after that, I left. I waited 3 weeks. I come back to the residence to see if Mr. Cruz is back home. When Mr. Cruz, that's in this meeting, answers the door, he asked me for my ID to prove that who I was, and he thought this was a scam. I said, well, no, sir, it's not. So I handed him my ID. I let him take a picture of it. And then I asked him, I said, okay, well, I showed you my ID. Can I see your ID? And he says, well, no, he says, I'm getting emails, I'm getting things in the mail that I owe this money, this and that, and I owe no money. And I was like, okay, well, I understand that. And so he was going on, and actually he did state that he was getting something in the mail or email from the one that I was there to service. It was to do, a service on. And I was like, okay. And at no time was a middle initial ever, discussed.
Okay.
So what I was trained to do as a process server, I listened to all the information, and he did admit he was Richard Cruz. And so at that time, I did place it at his feet and did a drop service and told him that he had been served. I got back in my vehicle. I sent in my information for my affidavit. And I will say that the only mistake that I did make on the affidavit is that I forgot to change the age on there for my prior that I served, which the gentleman was 55, 56 years old. I did miss that on the affidavit.
So you wrote on the description of the proof of service, age 56, male, base color, you put white, approximate height, 6'1". Is that
Yes, sir.
okay? All right, Judge, I have nothing further for Mr. Jordan. I do have some questions for Mr. Cruz, but I don't know if Your Honor wants to ask Mr. Jordan anything.
I don't think I do at this time, Mr. Jordan. Hold on, though, Mr. Cruz. Well, hold on, Mr. Cruz. Since it's,
Let's clarify a little bit what John Jordan said.
hold, Mr. Cruz, hold on. I'm going to give you, I guess, taking up half of my morning too, just like my last one this morning. Sir, why don't you raise your right hand there for me, Mr. Cruz? Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Okay. All right. First of all, why don't you give me you can put your hand down. Thank you. And you're Richard J. Cruz?
That is correct.
And what's the middle name, I guess?
Joseph.
Joseph. Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Goodman. You can go ahead and ask him questions then too. We've got to.
Let me clarify just a little bit here.
Well,
On the first bit,
Mr. Cruz, hold on. I'll give you a chance, but let Mr. Goodman ask
Okay.
you questions first, okay? It'll be a little bit easier, I think. Mr.
all
Goodman.
right.
Mr. Cruz, are you the father of Richard G. Cruz?
I am.
And what does the middle initial G stand for?
Gerald.
Gerald. And what is the address of Richard Gerald Cruz? Does he live with you?
I think you need to hunt that. I'm not going to do your work for you.
Your Honor, I'd ask you to instruct him. It's relevant to this case.
No,
Mr.
it's not relevant to the case. The
Mr.
case
Cruz.
here is John Jordan lying and affidavit signed that he delivered it to a Richard G. Cruz at this address, and that is wrong. He
Hey,
saw
Mr.
my driver's
Hold on,
license.
hold
He
on.
read the name Joseph.
Hold on, Mr. Cruz.
Okay.
You're the one that opened up this can of worms too. I need you to answer his question though. Mr. Goodman, go ahead and ask him again.
What is the address of Richard G. Cruz?
I do not have that in front of me. I do not have it memorized, and I'm not willing to help you after what John Jordan did, look for somebody else. I will say this,
Your
that he
Honor,
would be absolutely mortified.
Your Honor,
He would be mortified if he knew that information
I'd
you
ask you to-
gave me, that
Okay,
personal.
Mr. Goodman, I guess I can't press him too much. You know what? Why don't we do it this way? From everything I've heard, there's possibility that Richard J. Cruz was the one that was actually served. Now, I'm not faulting, quite frankly, I usually get appalled when the wrong person gets served. And I'm not faulting Mr. Jordan. It sounds like there's miscommunication between the two parties. What I'll do is find that there was no service on Richard G. Cruz, but what I will do is allow the subpoena. Is the summons expired? Do you know?
yes, it is, Judge.
I'm sorry?
Yes, it's expired.
First. Here's what I'll allow, Mr. Goodman. Summons has been expired. It's expired June 1st, but giving there was some earnest good faith that the summons was conserved. I can't go back and extend that summons. If you could do me, I know this is causing more work, but just to do it easily, if you want to refile the complaint and the summons, I'll tell my staff to waive the fees for it, given everything I've heard. And then with regard to service, if there's a request for alternate service, I'll consider alternate service.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. We
I
appreciate
think
it.
that makes the most sense for everybody,
I
quite
agree.
frankly, for Mr. Cruz and everybody, okay?
We appreciate the court's time. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Cruz, and we'll just leave it at that. So I'm finding that Richard G. Cruz was not served, okay?
Okay, but what about John Jordan's
Judge,
basically perjuring the court?
I don't believe from everything I've heard so far.
He saw my drive, Your Honor.
Okay,
you
go
saw
ahead.
my
and tell-
driver's
I
license?
guess, Mr. Cruz, if you want to tell me you're under oath still, then go ahead and tell me
I am.
what he lied about.
Your Honor, I would object to this route of question. If
No,
there's
no, you got
issue
your
here,
word
it's
in,
been-
buddy.
it's been
You
this
got your
Mr.
word in,
Cruz-
let me get mine.
It's been
Hold on.
this Mr. Cruz
Mr.
made it
Mr.
difficult.
Goodman, maybe I'm sorry, Mr. Goodman, go ahead. Maybe I'm jumping the gun. Go ahead.
Maybe I made it difficult. It's not my job to make it easy. John Jordan saw my driver's license. He read the word Joseph. He said it out loud. He knows that that is not the one, yet he went in front of a notary and said he served it to that person. He's a liar.
Okay.
Judge,
All right.
I would
He
ask
perjured
you to
himself.
strike
He
this.
duped you into issuing a warrant or a judgment.
Well, I think I've corrected whatever happened here, and I'm not taking any, the credibility is at issue for both sides, quite frankly. So, Mr. Goodman, we'll just do it the way I said, okay?
Thank you, Judge. I
Right.
appreciate
All right. Good luck to everybody. All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Good luck. All right.